January 14th, 1942, midnight on the Atlantic. Off the coast of Long Island, the water is black and glassy, broken only by the running lights of an unsuspecting tanker plowing east. On the bridge of U-123, German Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Hartigan watches through the periscope. The faint silhouette of the ship lines up against the horizon. He adjusts the scope with a sharp twist. Diesel fumes drift through the cramped compartment. His log records only 5 words in neat script. Target sighted. Attack at dawn. At the same hour in Washington, Admiral Ernest J. King receives a decoded intercept reporting multiple submarines operating within sight of American shores. He frowns, snaps the paper shut, and mutters to his aide, "The enemy is at our front door!" A sudden roar shakes the stillness. At 2 a.m., the tanker Norness erupts in flame, torpedoed within sight of Montauk Point. Burning oil slicks spread across the sea. The glow carries over the surf and reflects faintly on the glass windows of seaside homes. Fishermen awaken to the smell of smoke and gasoline, step outside and see the horizon alight as if a refinery were on fire. Survivors thrash in the icy water, clinging to wreckage while shore lights blink just miles away. The war, long distant, has arrived without warning. The image is unforgettable. Black sea, red fire, yellow city glow. Survivors cling to planks as if welded into a furnace of water and flame. For Americans, it is a shock equal to Pearl Harbor, but carried to their own beaches. The coast itself is no longer safe. Why here? Why now? The numbers tell the story with ruthless precision. In early 1942, the U.S. East Coast was the single richest hunting ground in the world. From Maine to Florida stretched more than 1,500 miles of shipping lanes, thick with tankers carrying fuel and freighters loaded with steel, grain, and troops. In 1941 alone, American refineries produced 190 million barrels of oil. Every day, tankers hauled tens of thousands of tons from Texas and Louisiana up the coast to feed factories and supply Britain. One well-aimed torpedo could erase 10,000 tons of cargo and kill a crew in seconds. Dönitz, commander of the German U-boat fleet, calculated that if each submarine sank just 7 ships per month, Britain could be starved of supplies in half a year. The mathematics was brutal and exact, like the ticking of a clock. Germany called the operation Paukenschlag, drumbeat. 5 long-range Type 9 submarines left bases in Lorient, France in December 1941, just days after America declared war. They carried 22 torpedoes each, with enough diesel to cross the Atlantic twice. Their range was 13,450 nautical miles, far enough to prowl the American coastline for weeks before returning to Europe. No escorts, no radar pickets, no blackout orders awaited them. Merchant ships still sailed alone, silhouetted against city skylines, running navigation lights as if peace still reigned. Hartigan himself later wrote in his diary, "It was like hunting cattle in a darkened barn with the door left open." Hartigan, U-boat war patrols, 1942. For the U.S. Navy, the vulnerability was immediate and overwhelming. In January 1942, only 37 operational patrol craft were available for the entire East Coast. Anti-submarine aircraft coverage was thin, and coastal radar was in its infancy, with limited range and reliability. Admiral King resisted the immediate introduction of a convoy system, arguing it would slow traffic and strain escorts. That delay created a window of opportunity that Dönitz's crews exploited with precision. As the first flames of the Norness drifted into the winter sky, the arithmetic of destruction had already begun. Within weeks, dozens of freighters and tankers would vanish, many within sight of bathers on beaches or commuters on boardwalks. By the end of January, 25 ships had been sunk off the American coast, more than 150,000 tons lost in a single month. Each sinking echoed the same pattern: a sudden explosion, black water swallowing steel, oil spreading like ink on a blueprint. The mechanical rhythm of war had crossed the Atlantic. Steel hulls versus steel torpedoes, engines against engines. A continent that had believed in oceans as armor now faced a simple fact: distance was no defense. Signal lamps flicker across the harbor of Lorient in late December 1941. German crews load crates of provisions. Down narrow gangways, black bread, tinned pork, barrels of diesel oil. Dock cranes swing like steel pendulums, lowering torpedoes one by one into the holds. Each weapon is 23 feet long, a steel cylinder packed with 600 pounds of explosive. Sailors check fins, grease threads, and lock the warheads in place. The boats will leave before dawn, bound west into the Atlantic. Dönitz, standing on the pier in his greatcoat, salutes as the crews disappear into the winter fog. The plan is simple and direct. Sail across the ocean, strike America before it can organize, then vanish back to France. The planning was meticulous. German naval intelligence had collected years of data on American shipping routes, port timetables, and even lighthouse patterns along the coast. Charts marked the daily departures from New York, Philadelphia, and Norfolk. Britain's Admiralty had warned Washington of the danger as early as December 10th, but the U.S. Navy, still reorganizing after Pearl Harbor, struggled to respond. Codebreakers at Bletchley Park in England could occasionally read German naval signals, but in the winter of 1942, the Shark cipher protecting U-boat traffic remained unbroken. That meant Drumbeat's approach went almost entirely undetected. Technically, the submarines were formidable machines. The Type WWII design displaced 1,120 tons surfaced and 1,232 tons submerged. Twin-man diesel engines generated 4,400 horsepower, propelling the boat at 18 knots on the surface. Submerged, electric motors drew power from 62 massive lead-acid batteries, giving a top speed of 7 knots for short bursts. Each carried 22 torpedoes, 4 loaded in forward tubes, 2 aft, with reloads stacked in racks along the deck plates. A 105mm deck gun provided surface punch against unarmed freighters. Endurance was long, 13,450 nautical miles without refuel, allowing operations in distant waters. The crew, 48 to 56 men, lived in spaces no larger than a city bus, air thick with oil, sweat, and machinery heat. Every bunk was hot-racked, shared between shifts. Across the Atlantic, the American side looked unready. Patrol planes were few and often unarmed. Some air bases still lacked depth charges. Navy destroyers, already escorting troop convoys across the North Atlantic, left gaps along the East Coast. Merchant ships sailed independently, their navigation lights glowing like beacons. Cities along the shore refused to darken their skylines for fear of disrupting commerce or morale. New York's skyline glittered so brightly that submariners joked they could navigate by Times Square. January 14th, 1942. U-123 prowls just east of Montauk. Hardigan has stalked his target, the Norwegian tanker Nornes, through the night. At 2:00 a.m., the order is given. Compressed air slams a piston forward, launching a torpedo into the sea with a hiss. The weapon runs true, cutting a white line across the black water. 30 seconds later, impact, an eruption of fire and steel. Flames roar skyward as the tanker splits open. The concussion rattles windows on shore. The U-boat turns away, leaving chaos behind. That strike was not isolated. Within days, U-66 torpedoed the tanker Alan Jackson off Cape Hatteras, killing 22 sailors. U-123 sank Coimbra within sight of Long Island, its burning oil slick watched by thousands on beaches. U-130 claimed 3 tankers in a single night off Virginia. In each case, the submarines operated with impunity. The Atlantic was so unguarded that German captains joked they were safer on patrol off America than in the Bay of Biscay. The statistics escalated with mechanical precision. By February, 82 ships had been destroyed in American waters, more than 450,000 tons lost. The German tonnage tally mounted like gears, turning on a meter, each click another freighter gone. Admiral Dönitz, receiving the reports, described the campaign as the second happy time, echoing the U-boat's earlier successes against unescorted convoys in 1940. For the men at sea, it was less abstract. Survivors of the Coimbra later recalled swimming through oil so thick it coated their skin, eyes burning, salt water filling lungs. In the official U.S. Coast Guard report, one line stands stark. Survivors could see Long Island shore lights throughout the ordeal. The sight of home, impossibly close but unreachable, became the cruel signature of these attacks. Back in Washington, Admiral King faced the mounting disaster with characteristic bluntness. On January 28th, he wrote in his diary, "Losses mounting." Public clamors for protection. Escorts insufficient. The pressure was immediate. Shipping companies demanded convoys, coastal towns demanded blackouts, and Britain quietly pushed America to adopt the same hard-learned measures London had endured since 1939. But the U.S. Navy was stretched, and in the early weeks of 1942, German submarines held the initiative. What began as an experiment, 5 boats testing American defenses, was turning into a systematic campaign. Drumbeat was working exactly as designed. Searchlights cut across the night sky above Norfolk in February 1942. Civil defense wardens marched block by block, shouting at residents to draw curtains, to extinguish porch lamps, to shut down neon signs. In New Jersey, hotel owners complained that blackouts ruin tourism. In Florida, city councils resist, refusing to darken oceanfront strips. From offshore, U-boat periscopes catch every glowing window. The first countermeasure has arrived, enforced darkness, but the execution falters. The U.S. Navy scrambles to adapt. By March, Britain dispatches Admiral Sir Charles Little and a team of Royal Navy officers to Washington, urging America to adopt the convoy system that had saved Britain 2 years earlier. Convoys mean grouping merchant ships under escort protection, sailing in formation, sacrificing speed for security. But escorts are scarce. Destroyers are already stretched on Atlantic troop runs. The East Coast has only a few dozen old four-stackers and hastily converted yachts. The first convoys are improvised, patchworks of merchantmen guarded by a single cutter or trawler. Yet even these halting measures begin to shift the rhythm of attack. For every adaptation, a limit shows. Radar, then in its infancy, offers range of only 10 miles, often unreliable in coastal clutter. Radio frequencies are congested. Ships jam one another with overlapping distress calls. Destroyers burn fuel faster than they can be refueled, their thin hulls hammering against Atlantic swells. The human strain mirrors the technical. Merchant sailors, often civilian volunteers, spend weeks in constant dread, sleeping in life jackets, boots on, knowing a torpedo can hit without warning. Lifeboats are overloaded, water rations thin. Even the Germans feel limits. Torpedoes sometimes run too deep, detonators fail, batteries corrode in salty air. Both sides grind against the friction of machinery pushed past design. The stress reveals cracks. In April 1942, off Cape Hatteras, U-552 stalks a cluster of tankers. In 10 days, 13 ships are destroyed, 200,000 tons lost. Oil coats the sea in black sheets, gulls falling dead from poisoned feathers. Fires burn for hours, visible from shore as if furnaces had been ignited on the horizon. Locals nickname the area Torpedo Junction. Residents drive to the beaches at night to watch ships explode, a grotesque spectacle framed against the boardwalk. Newspapers print casualty lists daily. The psychological shock grows as thick as the smoke. The Coast Guard and Navy try to counter. Blimps are launched from makeshift bases, drifting over the coast at 60 knots, scanning for periscopes. Civil Air Patrol pilots fly rickety civilian planes, peering into the water with binoculars, tossing small bombs by hand. Depth charges roll off the sterns of patrol craft in haphazard patterns, many too far from targets to matter. The rhythm is desperate improvisation against a measured, efficient opponent. The losses mount like numbers on a meter. In the first 6 months of 1942, over 400 ships are sunk in American waters. Nearly 5,000 sailors and merchant mariners die. Each explosion is both mechanical and human, steel torn open, engines silenced, lungs filling with oil and water. For the Navy, the setback is undeniable. America, still mobilizing, has lost control of its own coastal lanes. Admiral King, terse as always, finally acknowledges the scale. In a staff memo dated May 1942, he writes, "The present situation is untenable. Immediate convoy action required, but the convoy system cannot appear overnight. Escorts must be built, Liberty ships launched, aircraft deployed. Until then, the East Coast is a battlefield where every ship is a target. The setback is not a single battle lost, but months of cumulative bleeding. Each torpedo strike another blow against national confidence." In the words of one merchant sailor recorded in the Seaman's Log of May 1942, "We could see the lights of Hatteras on fire behind us, but the Navy was nowhere. The sea is vast, and machines grind without pause. Convoys will come. Escorts will multiply. Factories will turn steel into shields. But in the spring of 1942, the limits of men and machines are exposed, and the setback is undeniable. The spring of 1942 forces invention. At coastal airfields from Maine to Florida, small civilian planes painted with makeshift insignia take off in pairs. These are the pilots of the Civil Air Patrol, volunteers flying rickety craft, Piper Cubs, Stinson Voyagers, equipped with nothing more than radios and homemade bomb racks. They cruise low and slow, binoculars scanning the waves, calling in submarine sightings. Sometimes they carry small depth charges, rolled out the door by hand. It is crude, but it works. U-boats now risk being seen, harassed, forced to submerge. The air itself becomes a pressure on the hunters. Overhead, blimps drift on tethered lines, massive gas bags moving at 60 knots, able to loiter for hours. Their crews scan for wakes and oil slicks. Naval engineers install radar sets aboard them, the bulky equipment humming in the gondolas. On shore, radar towers sprout like skeletal steel trees, extending coverage mile by mile. Factories in Bethlehem and Newport News ramp steel output to unprecedented levels, each week adding destroyer escorts and Liberty ships to the fleet. The average construction time for a Liberty ship shrinks to 50 days by summer, and by fall, record launches cut that figure in half. Production becomes a weapon as decisive as any torpedo. The turning point arrives in May 1942. Convoy system implementation is no longer optional. The first organized coastal convoy, designated KS-500, leaves Hampton Roads under escort of 2 destroyers, several cutters, and aircraft cover. The formation is clumsy, merchant ships struggling to hold course, but the very presence of escorts changes the equation. Submarines now face depth charges, sonar sweeps, and coordinated defense. They can no longer linger on the surface firing deck guns. Every attack risks counterattack. Action proves the point. May 9, 1942, U-352 prowls off Cape Lookout, North Carolina, preparing to strike a small convoy. USS Icarus, a 165-foot Coast Guard cutter, detects the submarine on sonar. Depth charges roll off the stern, detonating with concussive bursts that hammer through the sea like sledgehammers against hull plates. Oil and debris rise. U-352 surfaces briefly, machine guns barking before settling under. Survivors bob up minutes later, the first German prisoners captured in U.S. waters. For the first time, an American crew has destroyed a U-boat off its own coast. The psychological tide shifts. The climax is not a single battle, but a cumulative reversal. Through the summer of 1942, convoy coverage thickens. Civil Air Patrol sorties multiply. Blimps patrol day and night. Radar grows sharper. By August, German reports note rising risk and falling returns. Torpedoes still sink ships, but the easy hunting is gone. U-boat commanders describe the coast as poisoned ground. Admiral Dönitz, reviewing his war diary entries, admits the American coast is no longer the killing field it once was. Yet the price of reaching this point is staggering. Between January and July 1942, 609 Allied ships are destroyed in American waters, totaling over 3 million gross tons, National WWII Museum. Nearly 5,000 merchant mariners perish, many within sight of land. Tankers bleed oil into beaches. Coastal residents collect debris, planks, lifeboats, oil-drenched corpses, washed ashore with grim regularity. The panic is real, the losses irrefutable. America, the nation that believed oceans were armor, has learned that geography is no guarantee. By the end of 1942, however, the balance has shifted. The U.S. Navy fields hundreds of escorts, Liberty ships launch weekly, and air patrols saturate the skies. The mechanical rhythm now turns against the U-boats. What began as Operation Drumbeat, a bold strike exploiting unprepared defenses, ends as the prelude to Germany's long defeat at sea. By 1943, convoy systems and Allied production strangle the U-boat fleet, and the hunters become the hunted. The aftermath is clear in the data. In 1942, U-boats sank 1,161 ships across the Atlantic. In 1943, despite more boats at sea, that figure fell to 588, while German losses soared to over 240 submarines destroyed. Clay Blair, Hitler's U-boat war. The steel equation reversed. American industry could replace ships faster than Germany could sink them, while Germany could not replace crews as fast as America could build escorts. The forgotten panic of 1942 lives now only in faded photographs, oil fires glowing on horizons, survivors in lifeboats watching shore lights, children collecting shrapnel on beaches. It was a brief season when the Atlantic breached America's illusion of safety, when every tanker offshore might vanish in flame, when warships scrambled to hold a line not in Europe, but inside of Manhattan. The thesis is simple. Hammered into history by statistics and scars, in 1942, the U-boat war proved that even America's vast coastline was vulnerable, until steel production, convoy discipline, and relentless adaptation welded a shield strong enough to hold.